I love the way Grant has just framed the song we've sung and really has framed the service for us. What would it have been like seeking to piece all of the pieces together for the first time? And what I find fascinating in the reading, and we highlighted it on the screen, is it wasn't just the first Sunday of the resurrection when the doors were locked. A whole week later, the doors are still locked. The horrors of Good Friday, I think, would have been so traumatic, lingering, dominating the memories of many of the disciples. There would have been a lot of fear. And I think it's really helpful to appreciate this frame in order to understand Thomas, often known as Doubting Thomas. But I think there's a fair case to make that he's also faithing Thomas. He's naming an unless. He wants to believe. He wants to take a next step. But he's stuck at this threshold kind of moment. And I wonder whether you've been on a threshold moment before where you're in one season and you know there's something calling you and you're wanting to take that next step. You sense there's a door, there's an opening, but there's a moment of encounter, a moment of trust that has to happen in order for that next step to actually be real, to be our experience. And in this encountering God theme that we've had this year, I wonder if you've had a moment like that already. Jesus prompting you, Jesus guiding you, Jesus inviting you. For me, it was the last sermon in January where a guest speaker spoke about Peter stepping out of the boat. And I just sensed, actually, that's the metaphor for me. I want to step out of the boat, but I'm looking out and it's not looking solid. And I've been on the edge of the boat for the last couple of months. And it's this sense of unless I take that step, unless I trust Jesus, I'm going to stay in this boat. And so without saying too much more, I want to invite us into a key aspect of Jesus' ministry that we see in John's Gospel. There are so many threshold moments when somebody's right on the doorstep, right on the edge, wanting to take a step. And Jesus has this habit of using the word unless, really focusing for them a key step that they need to take. And the first person we're going to look at is Nicodemus. And I wonder if you can think back a couple of months ago at the start of our Intimate Moments with the Saviour series. You may have been here when Kay and the youth were leading us. And the title of the service was Seeker. Because Nicodemus is a very educated person, thought he had it all figured out. And yet this person, Jesus, was raising all these questions for him. And we're told that Nicodemus came at night in order to have a conversation, an encounter with this Jesus of Nazareth. And Nicodemus was such an adult in the sense of he'd studied so much, he'd learned so much, he was so mature as a leader in society. And yet Jesus has this moment of saying, unless you become more like a child. And in particular, John 3 verse 3, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again. And it's interesting, isn't it? For someone like Nicodemus, he had to go all the way back to the womb, all the way back to childhood in order to take that next step with Jesus. Just thinking it through, just nutting it out, just using all of his higher powers of reason wasn't going to get it done. And Jesus shaped an unless for this man to help him take the next steps. Another disciple that we've been hanging out a bit with this year is Peter. And I invite you to think about, what do you know about Peter? If you were to use some words to describe him, what are the words that come to mind? I think for me, impulsive would be one of them. He's a real doer, a go-getter. He was never going to die wondering. He was always going to have a crack. I think I would also name him as somebody who's fiercely independent. And I think that was the key wrestle for him with Jesus. In the service that we named Deeper, we explored the passage where Jesus invited him to push out into deeper water and let the nets down again. And I think this was the journey for Peter, is learning to listen to Jesus. Learning to remember that Peter himself is not the Messiah. He's not just this self-sufficient person. He actually needed to become more humble, more vulnerable, more receptive to grace. And what I find fascinating is on the night where Peter was going to deny Jesus, and Jesus, knowing what was coming, he knelt down and he washed each of the disciples' feet. And when he came to Peter, Peter, true to form, says, "Nah, no, Lord. Not I, not me. You're not washing my feet." And here we encounter another unless. Peter, unless I wash you, unless you are willing to receive my forgiveness, to receive my grace, to allow your Lord to serve you in these ways, the wheels are going to fall off, mate, I think is what Jesus is wanting to say to him. And so later that night, when the rooster crows, indicating that Peter has denied his Lord not just once or twice, but 3 times, I think if Peter hadn't already started wrestling with this unless, I think he would have been in a very dark place, like Judas was. And as I imagine this scene, I think something shifts for Peter. There's an important unless for him in his life, in his journey, that even when in his impulsive self, in his go-get-it manner, he stuffs it up so badly, he needs to know there's a way back. He needs to know that the grace of Jesus can still find him, that he can be washed, he can start again. And so we come to Thomas, who, if you go with John's Gospel, has heard Jesus say the word unless so many times. Not just the ones we've looked at, but unless a seed dies, it will remain only a single seed. Or unless you abide in me, you can't bear any fruit. Again and again, Jesus is using this word, this unless. And there's this key moment where Thomas is naming that for him. There are these doubts, there are these things that are holding him back. And I think in a moment of courage, he's just fessing up and saying, unless I can actually see and touch, I'm not sure that I can believe in the way that I want to, the way that I need to. And I don't know if you noticed, but in the highlighting that we put up on the screen for the reading that John and others read for us, What happens the other side of this unless is remarkable. Thomas says, when the penny drops, "My Lord and my God," which is the highest declaration, highest statement of faith that we find in the Gospels. Nobody else calls Jesus God. Jesus is called the Messiah, the Anointed One. Jesus is called a Son of God by the centurion. But nobody actually reaches the heights of what Thomas declares. And in that way of wrestle, that way of struggle, some really important fruit happens, not just for Thomas, but for the whole crew of disciples who are still there with the blinds down and the doors locked. And so I'm not wanting to basically say we shouldn't call Thomas Doubting Thomas, because there is an element of doubt there, but I would say that doubt isn't the opposite of belief. The opposite of belief is unbelief. The opposite of belief is unbelief. Doubt is something different. Doubt is naming a question. Doubt is entertaining a wondering, a curiosity. We might be dubious, but there's still some curiosity there. And I've become more and more a fan of Thomas as I've gone along, because I guess I've got some big questions in the second half of my life. And I think the Thomases of the world do us all a really good service in helping us get unstuck by naming their unless. And so, friends, this morning, the invitation is to consider, is there an unless for us where we are right now, where we are in this season of our life? It may be I don't even need to say anything more. You already know that there is a key question. There's a key wrestle. There's a doorway. It might be like me. You feel like you're right on the edge of the boat and you know what's there. And you have a sense of the unless already. But it may be this is not something you've thought about a whole lot. And so in just a moment, we're going to have a beautiful song played, which is actually linked in with this verse, another of Jesus' unless, another verse that was spoken on the evening before the cross. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me, unless you stay connected. And I love the arrangement that Jesus puts in place. As we do the connecting, God will do the perfecting. As we do the connecting, God will do the perfecting. And there's such a relational basis to our faith and to our journeying with Jesus. And so in just a few moments, we will listen to a song based on this reading, based on this unless. And it's using the imagery of God being the gardener in our life, of God tilling and tending to the soil of our soul. And there's this moment of yielding, this moment of encounter and surrender that I love in the chorus. And it just says, "And I won't shy away. I will let the branches fall." An image of the pruning. So that what you want can stay and what you love can grow. Just love the yieldedness of those lyrics. And so, friends, nearby on the end of each row, there are some little unless pieces of paper. And if you don't have some on your row, go wandering and collecting. You don't need to have one of these to participate in a reflection for this song, but it might be that you find it helpful to have one. And when we come to a time of communion, there is actually an opportunity to place our unless in a receptacle on the communion table. That might be a symbolic step for you. It may be that you want to hold on to your unless and put it on your fridge or whatever, but we just invite you into this time, into this space of sitting with this question: Lord, what is it that you are saying to me? What is the next step for me? How can I stay in step with you? After we listen to this song, we will also encounter a second reading from the lectionary, which will be a change of gears. But let's just stay where we are for now, sitting with the unless. Let's listen to this song together.